Good morning, I'm Robert Tan sitting in for Mikey Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to impose 100% tariffs on semiconductor imports. Ultra-bilyonaryo Enrique Razon is Forbes' richest Filipino for a second straight year. And after much debate, senators archived the impeachment case of Vice President Sara Duterte. U.S. stocks closed higher Wednesday, lifted by a surge in Apple shares and upbeat earnings results. Apple jumped over 5%, boosting all three major indexes after a White House official said the company will unveil a $100 billion U.S. manufacturing pledge.
I think we're still just trying to find our footing. We had a little bit of a setback late last week. We've been kind of bouncing around since then. And I think there is a lot of tug of war at the moment between, are we going to see a seasonal setback after the strong run we've had year to date, or are we going to continue to grind our way higher? We're kind of in the camp of anticipating a seasonal setback ourselves. That said, the NASDAQ stocks are benefiting. For example, today, Apple is announcing a big announcement for more investment in the United States, so its stock is going up. But then it just seems in general as though the tone is still this resiliency, trying to bounce back from, like I said, last week's selling. We think it's just going to be a bumpy period. We need to consolidate a little after the strong gains, but we wouldn't bet against the market, and today is a great example for why.
The Dow Jones rose almost 0.2%, while the S&P 500 gained 0.7%, and the Nasdaq rose over 1%. In Europe, markets rose. London's FTSE rose 0.2%, while Germany's DAX added 0.3%. And France's CAC 40 gained nearly 0.2%. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. wants to fast-track a Philippines-India Preferential Trade Agreement, or PTA, to boost cooperation in high-growth sectors. At the CEO Roundtable in New Delhi, Marcos directed the DTI to begin formal talks with India, focusing on digital tech, semiconductors, and renewable energy, among others. He says both sides are working to finalize a deal quickly and sustain the growth momentum between the two countries, worth more than $3 billion. The United States is set to impose a 100% tariff on imported semiconductor chips. President Donald Trump announced that the new rate will cover all chip imports except for companies that have committed to set up manufacturing plants in the U.S.
We'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge, even though you're building and you're not producing yet in terms of the big numbers of jobs and all of the things that you're building. If you're building, there will be no charge. So I just want everyone to know that. And I didn't even tell you that inside. We discussed the concept, but I didn't. So it's a big factor. So 100% tariff on all chips and semiconductors coming into the United States. But if you've made a commitment to build, or if you're in the process of building, as many are, there is no tariff.
In a text message to BNC, Dan Lachica, president of the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation, said a 100% tariff would be devastating, adding that 70% of Philippine exports are semiconductors. He also said semiconductor exports last year were worth $30 billion. Sticky inflation and a looming rice import ban could prompt the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to revisit its easing plans. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has approved the Department of Agriculture's proposal to halt rice imports for 2 months, starting as early as September, in a bid to stop the drop in palay farm gate prices. HSBC ASEAN economist Aris Dacanay says the policy could tighten rice supply and worsen inflation. While still up for debate, he warns the risks are significant enough for the BSP to rethink its easing cycle. Agricultural output expanded by 5.7% in the second quarter, the fastest pace in 8 years. The Philippine Statistics Authority cites better weather conditions, which enabled high-value crops such as rice and corn to post double-digit growth. The value of production in agriculture and fisheries rose to more than 606 billion pesos. In a statement, Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel admits they still have a lot of work to do to achieve the vision of President Marcos for a modern agriculture sector. The Philippine Statistics Authority has kept first quarter GDP growth at 5.4%, but revised gross national income down to 7.2% from 7.5%. Net primary income from abroad was also lowered to 22% from 24.6%. Sectors with downward revisions include electricity and water, finance, and ICT. Meanwhile, manufacturing, real estate, and business services saw slight upward adjustments. Global uncertainty continues to affect international trade. Among the contributors are the Trump tariffs and the wars in the Middle East and Russia and Ukraine. Let's get some insights on the business climate and his reaction on the recent State of the Nation address of President Marcos. We'll be speaking with Chris Nelson. He's the Executive Vice Chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines. Good morning, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning, Robert, and a warm welcome to all your viewers.
Chris, let's begin with the recently concluded mid-year economic briefing with the British Chamber of Commerce, where Undersecretary Alan Hepty revealed that Britain's investments in the Philippines reached $764 million last year, the highest record. What's your take on this milestone?
Yes, it's a great achievement. It's driven by the Actis Fund investing in renewable energy, particularly in the Terra solar field. But it reflects a growing interest by UK companies and investors to look at the Philippines. And in that context, Robert, I'd highlight our recent PESA Investment Forum, which we held in London on the 27th of June. And also, I think that highlighted with Director General Panga the opportunities that PESA shows. So I think this will continue to grow. And as we move into next year, which is going to be the 80th year of diplomatic relations between the two countries, I think there's a lot of opportunities both in investment and trade.
Now, Chris, would you consider this as a strong indicator of deepening bilateral economic cooperation between the Philippines and the UK?
Yeah, indeed. I think that ties are continuing to grow. Our ambassador, Laura Beaufils, who's just done 4 years, recently left this Monday, actually. She said her farewell after having worked here with 4 years, and we'd like to thank her for the contributions. And President Marcos noted that in the farewell speech and also highlighted that, as I said, it's going to be 80 years next year. We have a new ambassador coming, Sarah Holton. Our trade is at $3 billion between the two countries. We recently had the UK's trade envoy, George Freeman, visit. And I think there is visions that over the next 5 years, we look to try and double that figure. So we see continuing growth between the two countries. That's what the British Chamber is working for. And I'd just like to highlight also our work with the Department of Trade and Industry, and of course the Philippine Embassy in London, led by Ambassador Locsin.
Now, Undersecretary Hepty also pointed out that Philippine exports to the UK grew by 7.8% to $546.5 million, the highest level since the 2022 peak. Now, given the impact of the Trump tariffs on both the Philippines and the UK, do you think it's time we pursue more bilateral agreements between the UK instead?
I think that's happening. I mean, the strengthening of the relationships this year has been highlighted because we now have a joint economic committee called JETCO, which is a further upgrading. The first meeting was in March, actually led by Undersecretary Alan Hepty. One of the things which the Philippines is pursuing is obviously looking at other trading areas and trading blocks. One of those is CPTPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Consultative Partnership, of which the UK is a member. So, of course, joining that will further strengthen ties between the two countries. And let me not forget that the Philippines is a member of RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which of course allows British companies who come and invest in the Philippines to also have a gateway and an access into Southeast Asia. So yes, it will continue to grow.
And in your view and observations, what key steps must the Philippines do to further boost foreign investments?
Well, look, I think what we want to see is continuing passage of the priority legislations. For the next Congress, we've been strong advocates of e-governance, Cybersecurity Act, and also the Open Transmission Act, Connectarong Act. Along with that, I think, Robert, we need to see further work on cutting red tape. We are an ARTA champion, but we want to see that moving forward. And that's why we're strong supporters of e-governance and also cybersecurity. The UK has a lot of skills in that area, again, as emphasized by our trade envoy. And we have two leading companies, members of our chamber, CyberQ UK and also CyberQ UK and Philippines, and also NCC. So I think there's a lot of expertise there and a need to get that Cybersecurity Act along with e-governance and the Open Transmission Act passed.
Now, U.S. President Trump said Washington will impose a 100% tariff on semiconductor imports. Now, what is your reaction to this?
Well, that's obviously a significant issue for the Philippines, as highlighted in your report. That is why I believe that the Philippines will look to need to diversify. Clearly, they've just had a visit to Washington. They continue to negotiate. The overall tariff was to 19%, but obviously you've got to look at key sectors. But that is why I think the Philippines, and I think this is going to happen across the world, will look for other trading blocks. That's why CPTPP is important. That's why developing increasing business and trade with the UK. That's why we continue to work with PEZA. We're very pleased to have that forum and to have the mid-year event, because this is all that we can relate back to companies in the UK and highlight to them the growing opportunity in the Philippines, not only as a market in its own right, close to 120 million people, and obviously young and skilled workforce. All these give opportunities both in trade and investment. So we see further opportunity, and to be supported by our incoming ambassador, obviously Sarah Holton. And we'll look forward, hopefully, again, to having our Great British Festival. I can see the picture there being flashed, which should take place, hopefully, in October.
Now, shifting gears, the British Chamber recently hosted a forum on smart manufacturing in the Philippines. Could you tell us a little bit more about this initiative?
Sure. This is part of our Trading Connect, and we're very pleased that we had speakers again from PEZA, from BCDA, and from one of our platinum members, PMFDC. And I think they all highlighted that the Philippines has an opportunity to present itself, as President Marcos has emphasized, as a regional manufacturing area for smart manufacturing. Now, linked to that, I think is upskilling the workforce, with obviously the issue of the US tariffs across the world. Companies and businesses are looking at where they need to be settling. We've seen that. As again, I have to refer back to the discussions I've had with Director General Panga. He sees opportunities as well for companies to come and do regional manufacturing. But linked to that, I think, Robert, is, of course, upskilling the workforce and, of course, passing work on cybersecurity. We need our companies to be secure. We need the Philippines to be up there leading. And I think there are opportunities, and we will continue to promote that.
And as global manufacturing moves away from long-distance production due to geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruptions, what critical transformations does the Philippines need to make it stay competitive?
I think you've got to add it all up to, first of all, as I said, as I re-emphasize, the ease of doing business, allowing companies to move here, obviously depending on where they go. Based on the discussions we've had, obviously the Create More Act is a support to that. I think also the workforce, we know the Philippine workforce is skilled, but we need to continue to upgrade those skills to make it competitive. And we need to look at how we can ease the companies coming and doing business here. There are other also macro factors. Got to continue to invest in the infrastructure. so that companies can move equipment and clear goods easily. And I think along with that, though, I'd like to just also make a comment in the overall context. I think also the Philippines is looking good because also it's done very well on inflation, which is now at 0.9, which shows from a macro perspective, we're actually getting the economy, and that gives opportunities, depending, of course, where we go, as we saw in the last report on rate cuts, but further sorts and boost the economy. So opportunities for the regional thing, upscale the workforce, but continue to make ease of doing business and passing key legislation a key factor.
Now, Chris, what's your reaction to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s recent State of the Nation address?
Well, we were pleased to see that he referred to e-governance. As I've mentioned, I think also the work on inflation, I'd like to commend the Department of Finance and everybody involved. We've also assisted in terms of food security with our work on exports of British pork and beef, led through our work with AHDB, the trade body in the UK. So I think that was all good. And I think an emphasis to say, invest in the Philippines. We're behind that. So I think those message points were very well made. And I think the economy is in a good shape, particularly with its work on inflation, and hopefully allowing Banco Central to, as made by certain analysts, to make possibly another 2 rate cuts this year.
Now, Chris, you've mentioned the good things that you've heard from the SONA, but from the British Chamber's perspective, were there any key issues or concerns that the president failed to address?
I think we would like to have seen him address, as he did in previous SONA addresses, an emphasis more on some of the key legislation. We would like to have seen, as I said, we are strong supporters of e-governance. We think that will be a key help. We have continued to support the need to pass the Cybersecurity Act, because this is a need that's being seen across the world, and we'd like the Philippines to be up there. And I think that would be a benefit to everybody, and the UK can help. We have strong expertise in cybersecurity. And of course, on the open transmission, we need to be able to have that connectivity to support those directives. So we'd like to have seen that. We'd have also liked to see, which he did do in previous SONAs, and all credit to President Marcos, further emphasis on the ease of doing business. We want companies to come here. We want this to be the preferred option. We want the Philippines then to use as a springboard for further work and development investment in Southeast Asia.
And finally, Chris, what's your economic wish list for the president moving forward?
Well, we look forward to obviously getting legislation passed quickly, working with the Congress. We know that the House Speaker, Martin Romualdez, has moved. We also obviously look forward to seeing the Senate, and the Senate also moving forward on those key issues. We'd like to see further rate cuts. Obviously, that depends on Banco Central. And obviously, from a particular perspective, we'd like to see clearly more investments from the UK and encouragement in terms of ease of business, doing business, reaching out to companies. And again, I'd like to just emphasize that very nice note he said to our ambassador, Boifisa, when she left, about the work she's done and the fact that next year will be 80 years of diplomatic relations. And I can only see that growing between the two countries with a further work. And highlighting back to your first point, Robert, the investments that the UK is now at a record in terms of infrastructure. So looks promising, but let's make sure we get that key legislation passed.
Yes. On that note, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Chris.
Thank you very much, Robert, and have a great day to you and all your viewers. Thank you very much indeed.
That was Chris Nelson, the Executive Vice Chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and narratives that matter most to your bottom line. The Philippine economy expanded by 5.5% in the second quarter of this year. Latest data from the Philippine Statistics Authority shows that this marks an improvement over the 5.4% growth recorded in the first quarter, though it's lower than the 6.5% growth seen during the same period last year. PSA attributes the positive performance to key sectors, including wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles, public administration and defense, as well as compulsory social security and financial and insurance activities. The Government Service Insurance System, or GSIS, defends its 1 billion peso investment in DigiPlus Interactive. It asserts that the pension fund remains strong, secure, and actuarially sound despite mounting public concern and congressional scrutiny. The agency also welcomes the scrutiny and call for public disclosure, adding that it is prepared to present all relevant documents to regulatory bodies. The statement came a day after Senator Risa Ontiveros criticized the investment. She called on GSIS to explain its decision to place public funds in an online gambling platform. Enrique Razon Jr. remains the richest Filipino for the second straight year, with a net worth of $11.5 billion, up from $11.1 billion in 2024. The ports to casino magnate further solidified its lead over real estate tycoon Manuel Villar, whose net worth reached $11 billion. Razon's wealth boost was driven by a 33% gain in ICTSI stock price, while Villar's holdings were impacted by stock trading issues and struggling projects. The heirs of the late ultra-bilyonaryo Henry C. Sr. still tops the richest family list, though their combined wealth dropped from $13 billion to just $11.8 billion. Other big movers include the Consunghi, Ke Azcona, Zobel de Ayala, and Cakyong families. Ayala Land Incorporated is set to launch 57 billion peso worth of property development projects in the second half of this year, including upgrades to its malls and hotels. In a regulatory More Filipinos found jobs in June, with the employment rate reaching a strong 96.3%. But as the job market grows, the quality of work remains a challenge, with a rise in unpaid and informal labor. Sujan Kim has the details.
More Filipinos found jobs in June as the employment rate rose to 96.3%, translating to an increase of 185,000 from the previous month. The services sector remained the country's biggest job generator, accounting for over 60% of total employment. The biggest gains came from fishing and aquaculture, followed by wholesale and retail trade, financial services, transport, and healthcare. According to economists, the jump in finance and insurance jobs is seen as a sign of sustained growth in the banking sector, one of the country's most profitable industries. But the latest numbers also showed sharp declines in construction, agriculture, and manufacturing, with total job losses in these sectors reaching close to 2 million.
Yung typhoon for sure will really affect yung employment natin sa agri and construction kasi hindi sila makakatrabaho pagka may typhoon.
Manufacturing job losses were tied to a slowdown in key segments like cement and electronics.
Hindi naman bumaba yung ating production ng semiconductor devices and other electronic components. Nag-decelerate yung, so bumagal yung pag-increase ng production natin. So nagre-reflect din dito sa ating employment na bumaba ng 114,000.
And following the recent issues on the proposed banning of online gambling, over 200,000 employees lost their jobs.
Nakapag-contribute doon sa pagbawas sa arts, entertainment, and recreation ay yung gambling and betting activities. Meron tayong bawas na 209,000, other amusement and recreation activities 16,000, and activities of sport clubs 9,000. Pero ang pinakamalagi dito yung gambling and betting activities, contributing to the largest share actually.
Still, overall, month-on-month unemployment declined, in part due to a drop in discouraged or tired workers.
Yung month-on-month, ang malaking naman na bawas, may bawas tayo na 86,000 ano. So ang pinanggalingan niyan ay kaya siya unemployed kahit na available siyang magtrabaho, Kasi pagod na daw siya. Tired and believe no work available. So dito yung mga discouraged workers, no? 44,000 yung decrease nito. Ang maganda dito, kumonti yung mga discouraged workers natin, yung tired and believe no work available.
However, the report also showed a rise in unpaid work, a red flag for job quality.
Hindi masyadong maganda. May dagdag actually na 296,000 na unpaid. Dapat ang nag-i-increase yung wage and salary, ano. So it's not quite good result. And we can also see yung wage and salary workers natin bumaba din year on year. And in particular, ang bumaba dito yung private establishments. Tingin ko dito, ang understanding ko is mga informal ito.
From working in family-run stores to doing informal labor without pay or contracts, a growing number of employed Filipinos still lack job security and regular income.
Over time, our employment rate is increasing, but I think we need to improve pa yung quality of work because we see in the underemployment rate na hindi pa nag-i-improve.
Despite steady gains in employment, underemployment and job quality remain critical issues. The data reveals a labor market that's recovering but not without growing pains. Soojin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Metro Pacific Investments Corporation beats expectations with a 20% increase in core net income, reaching 15 billion pesos in just 6 months. As the company expands into agri-food and tollways, big plans for growth continue, including Maynila's upcoming IPO and push into electric vehicle charging. Soojin Kim returns with this report.
Metro Pacific Investments Corporation beat expectations in the first half of 2025, reporting a 20% increase in core net income to 15 billion pesos, while reported net income surged 36% to 17 billion pesos, boosted by the sale of Philippine Coastal Storage earlier this year. Management noted that this 15 billion peso core net income was once a full-year record pre-pandemic, now achieved in just 6 months.
MPIC's numbers continue to show double-digit growth. Power continued to contribute the largest share at 11.2 billion or 64% of net operating income, with water and toll roads contributing 3.8 billion and 3.3 billion.
Meanwhile, Maynila's initial public offering is on track for October, with the target fundraise of $500 to $600 million, mainly through primary shares. Both international and local investors are now in final approval stages. Beyond utilities, MPIC is expanding its footprint in food security. The conglomerate has already acquired 5 agri companies and is fast-tracking its plan to build 10 new greenhouse sites outside Metro Manila.
He really wants us to help the agri and the farmers. This expansion into food and agri has always been MVP's push to make us self-sustenance in terms of feeding ourselves for the country. If we import most of the things that we eat, then what will happen to us?
MPIC is already supplying to SNR and is set to enter the marketplace, Shopwise, Pure Gold, and Landers by mid-August. Over at Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation, IPO plans are also moving forward. MPTC confirmed that total debt stands at 70 to 80 billion pesos, with 20 to 25 billion scheduled for refinancing.
But we have prioritized the debt servicing arrangements for the maturities that are going to be expected this next 12 months.
The company is targeting to raise at least 30 billion pesos via primary share offering. MPTC hopes to complete most of CALAX by year-end, with remaining segments possibly spilling into Q1 2026. Meanwhile, Meralco's growth remained flat as more households shift to rooftop solar panels, eroding demand. But a potential new growth driver is taking shape: electric vehicles. EV makers like VinFast and BYD are now in talks with Meralco for power support, including the installation of charging stations across the country. Soojin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange opened earlier. Let's look at the initial figures. The PSEI is in the red, trading at 63.49. Majority of the sub-indices are in the red. Decliners currently outpacing advancers 68 to 60. So far, value turnover has reached more than 768 million pesos. Meanwhile, in currency markets, the peso opened at 57.33 to the dollar, appreciating from previous close of 57.48. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. The Senate votes 19-4-1 to archive the impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte following the Supreme Court's decision that declared the articles of impeachment unconstitutional. The motion was pushed by Senator Rodante Marcoleta, who said the one-year ban had been violated and that the VP didn't get due process. Duterte's defense team acknowledged the Senate's move, saying they will now focus on submitting their comment complying with the High Court's order. The Akbayan Partylist slams what it says is a lack of character development on the part of the Senate. On Billionaire News Channel's On Point, Representative Percy Sendanya accused the upper chamber of failing to assert its independence and uphold the rule of law. Sendanya also claims the Senate is clearly coddling Vice President Sara Duterte and rushing to dismiss her impeachment case. Akbayan was the first group to endorse an impeachment complaint against the VP.
At nakita natin dahan-dahan paano mag-crumble. Yung una, separation of power. Pangalawa, yung sana pagtatanggol ng Senado doon sa kanyang mandato. At nakita natin kung paano, dahan-dahan nakita natin right before our eyes that the Senate really is indeed a Duterte Senate.
Sendanya vows to continue pushing for accountability.
Hindi tayo nauubusan ng energy to hold those who abuse power accountable. At magpapatuloy yung paniningil natin ng pananagutan mula kay VP Sara Duterte sa kanyang pagnanakaw sa kaban ng bayan at pang-aabot sa kapangyarihan.
Senator Erwin Tulfo says more officials from the DPWH are likely to be removed amid the alleged corruption on flood control programs across the country. This comes as Senator Tulfo confirmed that DPWH Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo was placed on a 3-month leave while investigations continue. Meanwhile, the senator also revealed 2 discoveries that one single contractor received funding for projects in Oriental and Occidental Mindoro amounting to a total of 40 billion pesos, and that 10 or more members of Congress are also contractors for government projects. This is why he says the president ordered a halt on the release of funds for flood control projects while these irregularities are being investigated. Ford is under fire after a Reddit post showed a territory unit catching fire on the road. Auto experts weigh in on what could have caused it and what drivers should do in case of a fire. Our mobility correspondent G. Baroga has the story.
Ford is literally under fire after a Reddit post showed one of its territory units bursting into flames while on the road. The uploader asked in Tagalog, "What car is this so it can be avoided?" The photo shows the front of the car completely ablaze from the hood down to the pavement. BNC Mobility reached out to both Ford Philippines and the car owner to understand what really happened, but so far, neither has responded. Auto industry veteran and Visor columnist B-Boy Vargas says incidents like this, while alarming, aren't totally unheard of.
This is usually caused by the buildup of carbon and oil in the combustion chamber that eventually ignites in the combustion chamber, and you have a runaway engine that actually leads to the car burning.
Vargas even shared a personal experience where years ago, an old car of his caught fire when a fuel injector nozzle came loose and sprayed gas directly onto the hot engine.
Technically, it's not impossible, but you have to consider that it's a fairly old car, no? And if it's a territory, that's a fairly new car. I mean, the territory has been in the market for a while. Maybe, just maybe, it was subjected to very severe road conditions, like it could be very rough.
Some Reddit users were quick to point out that the driver should have had a fire extinguisher on hand. and Vargas agrees. For Joe Ferreira, president of the Automobile Association Philippines, what's most important is knowing how to respond when something like this happens.
The first thing that you need to do is you get yourself out of a car. The second is if you have a fire extinguisher, try to extinguish the fire if it's still small. But once it's already blazing, you stand the risk of getting blown away with that fire.
One sentiment of the driver, nobody tried to help because people were too busy filming the fire instead. Ferreira's take?
Bumili ka ng insurance. I mean, if the car is insured, you just have a big bonfire in front of you.
So what does this mean for Ford? According to Vargas, it could be a reputational hit, but probably just a short-lived one. Industry watchers have also been advocating for a proper investigative body to look into incidents like this, something more official than online guesswork. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
We're taking a breather. Business 360 will be right back. U.S. President Donald Trump warns that he will hit China with more tariffs similar to the 25% duties he imposed on India.
On the India penalties, do you have any similar plans to enact more tariffs on China as it relates to their purchases?
Could happen. Depends on how we do. Could happen. It may happen. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you yet, but we did it with India. We're doing it probably with a couple of others. One of them could be China.
Still on President Trump, the American leader said his country had held good talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, adding that there was a good chance that he would soon meet with his Russian counterpart and Ukraine President Vladimir Putin. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff held talks with Putin earlier on Wednesday. The Kremlin described the meeting as useful and constructive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky believes Russia is more inclined to agree to a ceasefire. Zelensky spoke with Trump on the phone after Putin met with Witkoff.
Well, there's a very good prospect that they will. And we haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today. And there's a very good chance that we could be ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
And that's it for Business 360. I'm Robert Tan sitting in for Mikey Oreta. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.